Aperture.
We can get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Arthur O, Associate Professor of Photography at Parsons School of Design, which is part of the School of Art, Media, and Technology, and it's a division of the New School University in New York City. The Parsons BFA and MFA programs are research-based, studio-intensive platforms that inspire students to explore the convergence of both applied and creative approaches. Our programs provide a diverse learning environment in which students explore the expansive range of image-making technologies to engage in a community-centered and social justice-based cultural dialogue. I'd like to thank Emily Stewart and Aperture Foundation for the continued partnership with Parsons for these enriching public programs. This series, the Parsons Aperture Conversations, will conclude the season with a talk with artist Dion Lee on Thursday, May 6th. I hope you can all join us for that. Additional support for tonight's program is provided by mpb.com. MPB transforms the way people buy, sell, and trade used photo and video kits. As the world's largest online platform specializing in used photography and video equipment, MPB is a destination for everyone, whether you've just discovered your passion for visual storytelling or you're already a pro. Tonight, students can save up to 10% on all used photo and video kit from MPB. More information can be found in the chat. Now I'll hand things over to Michael Famighetti, editor of Aperture magazine, to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you, Arthur. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. As Arthur said, I'm Michael Famighetti. I'm the editor of Aperture magazine. For those of you who are not familiar with Aperture, it was founded in 1952 by a group of artists, writers, and curators as common ground for photography. Aperture today is a multi-platform publisher that unites the photography community in print, in person, and online. Tonight's program is the second event in our month-long series celebrating the New York issue of the magazine. This issue is part of our series of city-focused editions. Usually these highlight places far from New York and are designed to get us out of New York. But as this has been a trying and difficult year for the city, it felt like the right time to honor the photographers and writers who remind us of how much there is to discover and relish when New York comes roaring back from this difficult year. Tonight, we're thrilled to have a presentation from Irina Rozovsky about her project In Plain Air, which is featured in the issue. I had the pleasure of getting to know Irina a couple of years ago during a portfolio review and convening of photographers in the wilderness of Montana. So it's somehow fitting that we were able to publish her long-term project on Brooklyn's approximation of wilderness, Prospect Park. This is a green space that has long been indispensable for the city's residents, a place to play, stroll, a place to gather, and its tremendous value has only been underscored this past year. As people couldn't gather inside, we often gathered in parks. Walking through Prospect Park in the evenings this year, at least in the warmer months, it was amazing to see how all manner of social life migrated there. Dinner parties were staged, movies were projected on fabric hung from trees, dance parties went late into the night. These are things I witnessed because I live close to Prospect Park. In his text that accompanies Irina's photos in the magazine, the novel Joseph Mitchell writes of the park, "Always there is a lot to do, and more pertinently for the photographer, a lot to see." We're very fortunate to have Irina's lyrical record of what she has seen in this special place in our city. Irina Rozovsky recently published her third book, In Plain Air, which is of this body of work on Prospect Park, published by Mack Books in London. Her work has been exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Philadelphia Museum of Art, and recently in the Museum of Modern Art's Companion Pieces, New Photography 2020. This year, she will participate in exhibitions at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark, the Kunsthalle Mannheim in Germany. She lives in Athens, Georgia, where she and her husband, the photographer Mark Steinmetz, run the photography space, The Humid, and she is currently an MFA thesis advisor for the photography program at the University of Hartford, and she is also represented by Claxton Projects here in New York. Tonight's program is made possible and in collaboration with Rockefeller Center. If you have a chance to be in Rockefeller Center soon, please stop by Aperture's pop-up shop and see the Jamel Shabazz light installations that are on view there. And as Arthur noted, this program is presented in partnership with the photography program at Parsons School of Design of the New School. Um, Additional support is provided by mpb.com, and significant support of Aperture Magazine is provided by the Kanakia Foundation and by John Stryker and Slobodan Randyalovich. Aperture gratefully acknowledges Judy and Leonard Lauder for their lead support of the New York issue, and Lamont Editions for support of additional editorial content. Further generous support is provided in part by the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and the New York State Council on the Arts. As you can hear, Aperture is a not-for-profit organization, and the easiest way to support us is to subscribe to the magazine. And you can also purchase the New York issue at a discounted rate, or subscribe at a discounted rate if you follow the link in the chat on your screen. There you can also find a link to purchase Irina's book through the Mack website. We will be taking questions at the end of the program. Irina will present for about 40 minutes, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end. So please put your questions into the box at the bottom of your screen. And thank you again. And now I'm pleased to welcome Irina. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Michael, for that lovely introduction, and Arthur and Emily for having me, inviting me. Just like you said beautifully, that Prospect Park is an approximation of wilderness. I would say that this is a very strange approximation of an artist talk or a presentation. A body of work related to looking at people and being with people in a place about people to present to a screen where I only see myself is a little bit bizarre. So I will just have to imagine your faces and feel your energy through the screen. I will share my screen and show you some pictures. I'll try to go quickly, hopefully not too quickly, not too slowly. So yes, this is a talk about this book that just came out recently, of pictures that were made over the last 10 or so years. But I wanted to show you a few things to show you where the project came from, where it got its legs. This image is probably almost 20 years old, and I'm going to show you a few early photos. I was never a project-oriented person. Photography for me was just a way to roll through life. And if I had pictured back then that I would make a body of work in such a constricted area as the park, I would probably have been quite disappointed. I had my eyes set on kind of borderless, placeless locations, or no locations at all. I wanted to put together photos that had nothing to do with each other, that were made in different places, into conversation. And the sense of placelessness or rootlessness may come from the fact that, I was born in Russia, but I grew up in the US, and maybe it has to do with, not knowing where your home is, and, sort of, the idea of being an immigrant. So I was never really committed to photographing in one particular place until this was 2008, I found myself in Israel, and all my antennas shot up, and I realized that I had no choice in the matter. I was going to make a body of work somehow related, or in Israel. What it was about wasn't necessarily a documentary of Israel, but more the issues of struggle and time, history, misunderstandings, and struggles over the course of history, and not knowing who's right or wrong. And so this is the cover of the first book that I published. This was One to Nothing. It was published in 2011. And I remember someone saying, "Did you take this picture in Montauk?" And it's actually the shore of the Dead Sea, or Montauk. that's what they're, the Hamptons, right? And I thought that was so funny that, I had been racing around Israel, which to me was very different from Montauk, and that a photograph could really, he's got the Nike shorts on, and water is water, and sand is sand, and bodies are bodies. And so what does location have to do with anything? And that idea kept kind of um, playing tricks on my mind. And after the book was published, I kept returning. This is a picture from the book. It's a father and son on the coast of the Tibet. It's the Sea of Galilee. I'm always drawn to bodies of water, as you'll see in this next body of work. Bodies of water, bodies of work. And this is, this picture seems so different to me than the other ones that I just showed you in the book. It really kind of has a different quality of time. Nobody's racing, nobody is struggling, and it's this release. And the father's pose had nothing to do with the way I had been seeing Israel, which was, tension in every gesture, in every, inanimate object, in every rock. And this, despite the trash, despite, the fact that the boy's eyes are closed and his pant leg is rolled up, just has this calm stillness. And the fact that it's on the sea, on the edge of this sea on which Jesus is claimed to have walked on the surface, this biblical spot, this sort of paradise or utopia or heaven, perhaps, that things could look so casual and also painterly in such an important place was really kind of different to me than the other pictures. And then I was living in New York at the time, and I went with a friend to Prospect Park, which I had done many, many times, but this time was different. We went on this little boat. This is a postcard from the park from the 1870s. The park was built in the 1860s, so this was soon after. And this is a 1930s version, a more updated boat. So this was pretty much the thing that we were sitting on. And as we were, I'm gonna bring my mouse in here, as we were kind of pedaling along very slowly, minding our own business, it was maybe like a Saturday afternoon, early evening, sitting on all the shores, all the edges were people. And as you know, New York is very diverse, and it just kind of spread out in front of us. People were tucked in, in these private nooks and crannies, as if they were really hoping to have a moment of privacy, that you can't really have privacy in New York unless you're holed up in your apartment. And this was very different. And so, this is an image from the, I think probably 1870s, a photograph from the 1870s, from the 1870s. And, this is sort of the location I'm describing to you. So somewhere around here. So it just dawned on me that here at last was this other kind of utopia. I had been to Israel, which I thought was this holy land, but, it seemed like this was the holy land, this was the American holy land, that this cliche tale that we'd grown up learning, that land of the free, that America is this place of the melting pot of all these different people. It seemed so true, it seemed so real, it was just all right there. And so I knew I had to photograph it, and I wasn't quite sure how. This is the very first picture I took. I started going in from the southern entrance of the park, which was really different. I didn't even know about it before. But it was closer to the lake, and as I said, I'm always kind of like a fly to light. I'm always drawn to water. So you go in through the south, and there's the lake. And so I saw this couple, and quite obvious reference to Adam and Eve, and then maybe the guy got tired and had to sit down for the second shot. And these pictures are never made it past the contact sheet, but I just wanted to show you the very first effort. They're too far away, they're too casual, and it feels as if the picture's over and these people are just going to walk off and do their thing. And I wanted something other. I wanted that feeling that they were trapped in the photograph and they had nowhere to go and nothing to be outside of that photo. um, I realized that this is just I'm showing these to you for like almost like Google Street View, but I'm showing them to you in old vintage photographs. This is again the lake. Um, this is a photograph of mine, 1889. Is that same bridge, I believe, or maybe one of the other ones. I realized it was not about the architecture. It was not about the recognizable features of the park, as beautiful as they are. Um, you know, this was not going to be kind of a spotlight of all of the facets of the park and what the park was designed to do or be. Um, I did not see you in the parks, Anna. I think this postcard was also from the early 1900s. Um, so this is also an outtake. Maybe I like the moment, I like the two of them, but in the end, I think the structure is just too much um, of a feature. It's too recognizable. You know, as strange as it looks. Um, I was drawn to these. So anyway, I'll tell you what I'm drawn to later. But I'm just going to show you how the pictures started coming. At first, I really struggled to really scratch at the kind of photograph I wanted to make. It was sort of like I was chasing a smell, or I had my eyes closed and I just had to kind of keep groping for that image. And I made so many wrong ones, and I kept trying to get closer and closer. This was the first one that I think was really hit it for me. And then they just started kind of building on each other and coming um, one after the other. Um, I was going quite often. I would go a couple times a week, just ride my bike down there and walk around the park. And it was, it became infinite. It's maybe an earlier version of myself would have felt claustrophobic there, but here it just felt impossible to see anything two times in the same way, that even if I came back to the same spot, this person wouldn't be here, and the light would be different and the weather would be different, and my mood would be different. Or even if I met her somewhere else in the park, it would almost like meeting a new person. So it felt infinite that way and sort of bottomless, and I couldn't get enough. And I just kept photographing. I guess it's as simple as that. And I think my task, the idea that I was chasing I wasn't trying to portray anything. The way it seemed to me was that each place, each spot, each scene, I guess I would call them scenes, reminded me of something. They were no longer Brooklyn, Prospect Park. They sort of seemed to tap into other images or other memories, or this place began to mold once I stripped it away from recognizable features or something, things that were too modern or too. This, by the way, is the same tree. This is after Hurricane Sandy. It came down. That's my bike and backpack. The images began to feel, or the process of making the photos really began to feel as if, someone was spinning a roulette, and each place the ball landed would be a different location, almost around the world. And what I mean by that is maybe better if I read a quote from a book that I was reading at the time. I started this in 2011, and that's when I made the bulk of the photos, 2011, 2012. And so anyway, the book is, I'll tell you what the book is after I read the quote. My mind thus gradually created a kind of ideal landscape in which the Arabian desert, the realm of the Aztecs, the continent of Antarctica, the snow-covered Alps, the Northwest Passage, the River Congo, and the Crimean Peninsula formed a single panorama, populated by the figures to the proper, populated by all the figures proper to those places. I could move in and into that world at any time. So that's W.G. Sebald from the book Austerlitz, which was kind of pivotal for me at that point. So I really began to feel that way, that, you know, what is diversity and what does it mean to go to a park? A park is a sort of blank canvas on which you can project the park is all about you when you're there. You don't even know what it's like when you're not there. And so I was there to witness it, to observe it, to fantasize it, to project upon it. So, you know, to me, this was a sort of almost like a tribal dance or some sort of. This was definitely not Brooklyn, and as kind of new agey as that might sound, that was what was interesting to me, to kind of consider each moment a sort of different geography. It seemed as if that people brought their own geography from this here's the diaspora, and wherever people were from, they sort of emitted that into the air, whether that's through light or color, but it's as if their origin sort of hung in the air around them, and the park kind of accepts it, and it is the stage. It's a kind of theatrical opportunity for someone to be who they are without almost without knowing it. I'm going to read one quote, and then I'm just afraid that the picture after is from something else, because maybe I'm going too quickly, but I won't know because no one will tell me. So this was around this time also, like, I don't remember what year it was. Maybe we can discuss it in the Q&A. Philip Seymour Hoffman passed away, I think in 2012, 13. And there's an article about him by Anthony Lane in the New Yorker. And he says, he demonstrated that life itself, when lived to the hilt, acquired a flourish of the theatrical. And I kept thinking about that, that this is a public place, that there are no walls. Are people more themselves here than they are at home, when there isn't the prospect of being seen, the prospect of being sort of witnessed? And there is a kind of theatricality that people aren't responsible for, that is part of being, like, in a public place, in nature. You're kind of like releasing your inner self. So in the meantime, I had gone to Cuba. So this is maybe 2012, 2013. And I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures, because I don't want you to think that the way I'm photographing the park is the way I photograph anything. It was really particular to that place. And I have an idea why. But in Cuba, most of these pictures are in Havana. I'm using a different camera. I'm working really differently. Things are more chaotic. There's a kind of immediacy to the pictures that's different. So that's, the setting is so different. And I'm really interested in how a picture is dictated by its environment, that it's not, I can't exert all the control. Like, I need to listen to what's there to be able to make the picture that needs to be made. So now this is back at the park, but I put these two pictures together, just, bodies, skin, and a good time. But in the park, it's quite different. It still has that, maybe this picture less so, it still has that kind of, it's all contained in the photo. You're not really thinking about, maybe in the way that painting functions, or plein air painting functions, particularly, that you're not thinking about people, like, going home on the subway, or who they really are. It's more of an impression. So I think I'm getting to the end of the slides, but for instance, this picture um, reminds me, even though when I took the photo, I had never been to Georgia, but you know, now I live in Georgia, and so many things I see look exactly like this, and it's just amazing to me that one place can look like another place, and to me this felt so kind of um, southern and tropical when I saw it. It was a stand-in for that, and um, Michael, how are we on time?
You're good on time, Irina.
Okay, thanks. Um, so this is, the first picture that I talked about of the man sweeping the lake. This is a picture that I made in 2020. I had gone to New York almost just by chance, by accident for a few days. And I was there in February 2020, right before the pandemic. And I guess I was maybe thinking about that first photo of the man sweeping, and this seems, another version of that. But I really like this sense of care, and that it's almost things that you would do at home, but they're doing them, you know, in the park, obviously. And of course, the reason that I'm photographing in the way that I am is not because, um, I guess it's not random. It's the way things appear. And why do they appear that way? It's because of this guy, Fredrick Law Olmsted. I love this picture of him. I wish I had taken it and could include it in the book. Um, I guess you can see the cane there. I don't know why the negative is so messed up, but he's old. He's already made his legacy. But what an amazing person to make these views, to design this place so that people walking around think that they're discovering this beautiful view. Look at this. Look at this view. It's so beautiful, as if they are exploring. And he takes sort of the back seat, like he's creating this experience for them. He's It's not this hyper controlled thing where you feel like you're being led around. In all of his designs, it's pure democracy. It's the power is in the person's choice of which path to go, and how it where it leads him or her. And I didn't really study him at all, or what he was doing when I was doing this project, but he was always in the back of my mind. And recently I was watching a documentary about him, and it said that he had the pragmatic challenge of building a dream in the middle of a city. And that's exactly what it is, so many years later. And the way, Michael, you described all the things that were happening here, it's happening there during COVID. It's it's a dream that's so necessary. It's a dream that's like this vital need. But I would claim that it's not just to escape the city, but to escape, every sense of reality, to be able to go somewhere else, to be able to travel. Um, so this is Rachel Evil met Miss River in the streets yesterday. She teaches here. The two Rachels are well and happy and seem to be getting fat. This is the prettiest part of Brooklyn. The country must look beautiful. Francis Evo, 1906. So this is the northern entrance at Grand Army Plaza from back then. I guess they used to call it Defender's Arch. I don't think they do anymore. So I believe, okay, so this is the last slide. This is also a found photo. When I was making the book, I was playing with the idea of including a lot of, or some images from the 1800s, early 1900s, and obviously I really like this one, but I'll show you the book now, and you'll see that that idea didn't last. So this is the book that we made with Mack. I don't know if you can you see this, y'all?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so so it's this image of the people dancing, and it's from front to back. It wraps around the book, and I had originally thought to use one of the old postcards on the book on the cover, but I don't remember how I talked myself out of it. And then this is this was the very first dummy I made. I used to, I wanted this historic aspect to be present, to show that this is a place with a history, and to be able to kind of swiftly change times to go from, to show that this place isn't just about contemporary people. And so this is like the cover of an old book, it has the marble paper, and this is, I think, a leather front. And then, I don't know, these are just the very earliest pictures that were in here. But just coincidence, they look so similar, right, in tone and in quality, that even though this is a photograph, it still has that kind of office cabinet feeling. And so what can I tell you? So the layout of the book, it's not, the sequence, is not quite like the sequence I showed you, and a lot of pictures were missing, but it was important to me that it not be separate, not be chronological, not be separated by seasons, that the photos were linked by, I don't know, I guess something ineffable. So you really feel as if you're kind of wandering, lost in this place, which is what I was doing when I was making the work. So for instance, there's some photos that, this is a snow image here, and a, spring or fall image here, and they don't seem to relate in anything, but they do. So I think I would love to, if anyone has any questions, I think I just want to say thank you. I never envisioned, when I was making these photos, I never envisioned making a book, even though, I had made books, but I wasn't making the photos with that in mind. And when I started thinking of a book, never in a million years did I envision it coming out now, especially doing the artist talk in this format, holding this thing. So it's all, who knows why things happen, but also, it feels also like kind of received in a way that's a good time for it, where being together outside is kind of a vital need. So I'm very grateful. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Irina. We actually have a lot of questions in the chat. So the audience, please continue to submit questions. But I'm seeing a common thread amongst the questions, which is people seem very curious to know more about the way that you're working with the subjects in the photographs. And one viewer writes, how do you achieve such intimacy with strangers? So many of these photos make it seem like you've become immersed in their worlds, like you've spent the whole day with them. So maybe you could describe a little bit about your working process. Is everyone aware that you're photographing with them? Is there a conversation? How does that work? Or is there a...
Who asked that? That was a nice question.
That was Yael.
Oh, hey, Yael. Hey. Well, I like to say about this time period in my life when I started making this work that whatever, I'm like a late bloomer. So maybe I was going through I was maybe like late 20s. Maybe I was going through like the angst and crises that people go through in their teens. I was going through it then, and I was very lonely and kind of depressed and miserable, even though the pictures look like I was on cloud 9. But I would walk around the park and just watch. I felt like I needed a lesson in how people in humanity. And so I had no issues just coming up to people. But I was selective, obviously, but I don't know. I knew I had to be close, and I knew I knew I had nothing to take. It wasn't a matter of taking, you know, I think it was people were open. The people are very open there with me, much more so than if they were on the street or if I was to make an appointment. You know, there was no big deal really. Like people are at their best. Everyone's kind of glowing and shining, and it's this like shared thing. There's this solidarity and this kind of loveliness that you guys all know of in New York. And so guards are down. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I don't know what the other thing is. My task was not to make people do what I wanted them to do. I think the trickiest part was how do I naturally um, emphasize what that person's already doing and uh, and make it seem like they're doing it for this particular moment in this, you know, it's like that quote, the flourish of the theatrical. So yeah, I don't know.
Um, Here's another question. Hi, Irina. Just came back from the park. It misses you.
Oh.
I'm wondering how you felt about yourself when you made these pictures over the years. Did you feel like you were on a hunt, on an assignment, or were you more in your head at times? If the latter, how did that affect the pictures?
Who's that?
Oh, that is Sasha Uritinova.
Sasha. She knows how to answer that. No, there was no hunt. I mean, there was a hunt because I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't get enough. So there's always a hunt. You know, I think photographers are just like the hunting breed. Um, but it wasn't like a hunt in the way that like, you know, the Bruce Gilden hunt or, you know, I won't say names, but I mean, it was more of a wandering. It was just a total wandering, you know. It's like it feels a little bit like, I don't know, an orphan from Oliver Twist or something, like asking for like, can I have some more porridge or something, you know. It was like definitely in my head. It was like a need. It was a need, and I think maybe people picked up on that I wasn't, there's a lot of photographers there, you know. I wasn't like collecting points, you know.
Well, when you brought up WG Sebald before, I thought of that idea of, because his narrators are always these kind of, well, they're like the flaneur. They're these wandering characters moving around, accumulating information, and which made me wonder how you worked. Like, did you work that way, or did you just? You talked about kind of entering through the south of the park at one point. And I'm just wondering, to what degree were you trying to cover? Like, Prospect Park is, I mean, it's amazing for so many reasons, but they're like worlds upon worlds within the park, especially depending on like what's going on in the park is also representative of what
Yes.
what neighborhood you're kind of near in the park.
Mhm.
You know, like if you're on the south side of the park, it's different than if you're
Mhm.
on like the park slope side of the park. So I'm just wondering how that figured into your, like, you know, mapping sounds too clinical, but were you trying to kind of capture the way that the park, you know, it just varies from place to place, like everything about it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. I should have said it. I usually do, and I forgot that it seems like you can go anywhere, but there are these neighborhoods in the park that are close to the neighborhood outside the park, like Flatbush, and um, people hang out. I can't believe I didn't say that, so thanks for bringing it up. Like people hang out in their circles, kind of, and then some sort of. I mean, it's not that calculated, not that set, but there are like mostly white people hang out in the north, you know, in the Great Lawn, and then the Haitian Circle when I was there was down there, and then um, I don't know, all these things that feel taboo to say now, like to call people out on their culture. And what I would do was, yeah, I would go in through the south or maybe through one of the middle entrances, and I would just walk, you know, I would follow the light, depending on time I got there. And you know, soon it would be, I just always managed to get lost. I would always be like, wait, where am I in the park? And so then I think once I stopped getting lost and I knew how to get around, I realized it was sort of coming to an end, and it was more like forcing it. But the first few years, I really didn't know where the hell I was. And, you know, you just get lost photographing. Um, but it's definitely a flaneur process. Like, I'm not hanging out with people. I don't have time for that. Or I don't feel comfortable doing that because I'm not, I mean, I made friends, or I followed up with people. I sent them photos, but I'm not hanging out. I'm like just pacing, I'm walking, I'm getting around.
Okay, and somebody asks, how did you know when you were finished with the project? Speaking of ends, and actually, I wondered too if you worked on this for years, and then while you were living in New York, and then you left New York, you moved to Georgia, correct? And did you edit the work once you were outside of the city? Because I'm wondering, like, just in terms of knowing when you were finished with the project, like, did you see the project differently when you had some distance from the project and from the city itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I moved first to Boston for a teaching job at Mass Art, and then so I would go to New York periodically and kept photographing there. Like, I remember coming back and like, I was photographing the plow bale at the time, and it just like dropped, and I kicked it across the park, like just flying across the park. That was from Boston. That's when I was in Boston. And then when I moved to Georgia, like, okay, that's really burning the bridge, and I started editing it, and I just never felt like I had enough photos. And I just was like, oh, I'll never be done. I'll never be done. And then when I went there in the 20s, in 2020, that February, and like, who knew? Someone was like laughing at the pandemic on the train, I remember, on the subway. But there was this moment when I was there and I was leaving the park, and there was a grandfather they were Russian, with his grandson, and he was probably like, 3 or 4 years old. And the grandfather, and I had my camera, and the grandfather had a camera, and I'm trying to, leave. And the grandfather says to his grandson, he's like, женщина photograph, like, oh, a woman photographer. And I don't know, he probably didn't know that I understood him, but I was like, yeah, I'm done. It just felt complete. And then it was just time, it was the timing. I guess it had been, I didn't calculate it, but I guess it had been like 9 years at that point. And I just felt like I had gotten it together. Mm-hmm. Made the nest, had all the pieces.
Well, speaking of when the pieces come together, somebody asked, I would love to hear about the first 4 images of the book. I've looked at them over and over, and they're incredibly captivating as a set and a series. What was your thought process in editing and sequencing those photographs in particular? Maybe you could show us the first, can you so people understand which picture?
Do you want me to show the book or the PDF? I can find the PDF of the book.
Hold up the book.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Who asked that?
Joseph Deo.
Oh, Joseph, hello. So this is the first, so this is the cover, and I was thinking that, okay, you think, like, I don't want you to be able to place yourself, that, like, don't get too comfortable, and don't think that you can predict where you're gonna go. So from the cover, it's this, so it's the same tone, but it's like clearly a different location, you could, like, this just, like I said, it feels like, Georgia or somewhere more southern, whereas this, maybe just kind of how sharp these figures are there, feels a little bit more uptight. And then I really like this as a setting, as a sort of like preparing a stage, or, both preparing, but also like closing things down, like at the end of something. So I like starting with the end and ending with a start. And then, like the snow pictures were tough, because what do you do with snow pictures? But I don't know, sometimes I can't articulate it. Like from this, there's something in the color quality and the softness of what this guy's doing. And then, he's trying to clean things up, and here's this thing that he forgot to clean up, and it's 2 people lying there together on this white blanket. And then to me, this just felt strong across from the title. It's sort of like a statement, like a punch, like, damn it. Yeah.
And another question about the book. Reed Temple asks, what was your decision process for not including the old historical black and white photos? In your mind, how would it have changed the work in the book? And he thanks you for your wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was a kind of, I wouldn't say painful, but it was a really long decision. I mean, this is like a long cooking process. This is like not a Instapot, which my first two books were really fast and furious, and this has been like, well, the actual like making of the book with Mac, with Morgan and Michael, it all happened really quickly, but like the thinking process took a while for me beforehand, and I was really attached to the old photos. Like I remember this incredible person, Brenda Bingham, and she was my assistant at the time. We'd go to the Prospect Park Alliance, and they have a whole collection of old postcards and pictures, and I really thought I was going to use them, and then just started sort of letting them go. Maybe people said, "Oh, your pictures don't need them," or something, or I don't remember. I just thought maybe there's a way to keep it contemporary, but also harken the past, without having, maybe it would be too obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, to me, it was the right decision to leave them out, because I think those postcards are all about the picturesque, and they're all about this kind of creating a kind of like iconicity to parts of the park. And I think your work kind of works against that. And that's what I find really compelling about it. But here's a question. So there is this tradition of photographing in parks in New York. And in the New York issue, that was one thing that we wanted to highlight. And why we were so excited to encounter your project when we did was because we were just thinking about like the role of public space in the city, and the park obviously being this amazing democratic space. And so your project came along at like the perfect time. And I remember I was working with Brendan and Nicole, who work with me on the magazine, and we were like, okay, this immediately is going in. But Tommy Keith asks if you were aware of Todd Papageorge's work made in Central Park, and how, if or not, your work is in conversation with those images. But I suppose you could open up that question to Todd Papageorge or Gary Winogrand or Bruce Davidson. We have, who did a lot of work in Central Park. And there is, a tradition of photographing in green spaces or public space more generally in the city. And yeah, maybe I'm curious to hear you answer that question.
It's a very fair question. I'm not saying it's a good question, but it's fair. But I think the Todd Papageorge photos I love. I'm not sure about it. I mean, East of Eden, right? No, Walking Through Eden. Sorry, Walking Through Eden, and I mean, there's some photos in there are just blow my head off or whatever, and blow me out of the water, and knock my socks off. But I think the conceit's different, and I can't photograph like that. I wish I could. They're so intense. The interactions are so intense, and I'm not that kind of photographer. And I think, I mean, portraits are really hard for me. I'm like really out of my comfort zone, and I think he's more like slicing through people. They're much more intense. They're not critical. They're just so kind of socio-psychological, and they're about the park, but not really about the park. They're more about, like, for him, I think it's an excuse to see people, and for me, it's about the park by way of the people. I would say it that way. And I think my pictures aren't as intense. I think they're more like I'm like petting people on their head as I photograph them.
I like that, the park by way of the people. Somebody else asks, is Angela Lewis asks, did you find that you were drawn to a certain time of day to shoot? How would you decide on which days in the week you would go explore? And you're clearly there at certain points when the light is such.
Yeah, I'm definitely, there's a lot of sucker light in there. But no, I mean, it was really interesting to see the same places with the lights on and the lights off, and just realize that, I mean, some light is really difficult to photograph, and it's just so flat. But I wanted that aspect to be in there too, that some days are just flat. And that rock picture, for instance, was about that. That it's not about sunshine. It's more about this kind of rounded, balanced set of feelings, complete feelings.
And is there text in the book?
Yes, there is. There's an essay that I wrote.
It's your text.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So Emily is texting me that we should wrap up soon. So we are getting a lot of questions about what kind of camera you were using. I don't know if you're opposed to mentioning this, but that question is out there if you choose to answer it.
I mostly was using the Pentax 6.7 with the 105 lens that I then exchanged for the 90 lens, and I also tried to photograph with every other camera possible. I even tried the Hasselblad, and I tried the Plowbell. There's some Plowbell photos, there's some Mamiya photos, but really it's a Pentax baby.
Okay. And somebody asks if the films of Bela Tarr are an influence.
Sorry?
The films of Bela Tarr, the
No,
Hungarian, I believe,
no,
filmmaker. Okay.
no. Why? I should see them. I haven't.
Definitely worth seeing. I'll admit that I haven't seen them in quite some time. I was actually wondering though, if you showed the postcards, but I'm curious about what other, what other art forms were influencing you with this project. I'm thinking, because you brought up Calvervo and the designer of the park, and I know that he and Fredrick Law Olmsted were really influenced by the Hudson Valley School of Painters when they were designing Central Park and Prospect Park. Was painting important to you?
Yeah, I mean, Manet, I would say, and Courbet, Millet. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say that, but that's sort of what it was about. I mean, I was trying to make photos as if they were in essence of that time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think we can end it there unless there's anything else that you would like to add, Irina.
No, I probably forgot to say things, but this is I'm just this is the best given the format. And yeah, thank you for this, for the invitation, and for everyone.
No, thank you. And I want to point everyone who's listening in to, if you go to Aperture's website, you can read Joseph O'Neill's beautiful essay on this project that was published in Aperture magazine, and visit Mack Books and buy Irina's book.
Michael, I hope one day we can actually have those martinis again. That would be
someday.
optimal.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Thank you for everyone who supported this talk, and also look at Aperture's website where you can learn about the upcoming programs that we have planned connected to the New York issue on our events page.
It's a beautiful issue, so congratulations to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, take care and good night.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.